Hello, my wonderful students. All right, so we had a sort of a unexpected situation today, live streaming from the classroom. I'm curious to know what you guys thought of it. I talked to my students who were in person. Uh, they said they felt pretty good about it. They didn't feel like they were losing out on anything by the fact that I was also live streaming to you guys at home. But I'm curious to know, those of you who were at home, how did you feel about it? How did it compare with live streaming with Mr. Mevs in terms of the fact that I was trying to talk to the students in the classroom and also talk to you guys? Did you feel like that took away from the experience? Did it make it more difficult for you to learn? Or did you find that it was helpful? Did you find that it was a better experience than joining the other class? So no judgment, obviously, either way, but I would love to get feedback from you guys to know what you thought was working well or what wasn't. That being said, as I said to you guys in class, since we were a little behind on time because of trying to set up the Zoom and get everything settled unexpectedly, I just wanted to go over the last couple of slides that we didn't get to in class. So I'm not going to pull the slides up on the screen in this video, so what you guys can do right now is just go to your Google Classroom.
This is entry going to send the kid up to speed.
Open up the slides for the lesson so you can follow along. So we're looking at where it says Gupta Empire. So just going back to what we talked about in class, Gupta Empire was an empire that controlled most of India. They were decentralized in their rule, meaning they ruled with a light touch. And we went over in class the pros and cons of that kind of a system. This was different than many of the other empires we've studied so far, or a number of them, like the Persians, the Achaemenid Persians, the original Persians, and the Maurya Empire in India, and certainly, as we will see next week, the Qin and Han dynasties in China, and the Roman Empire. All of them were strong centralized empires, and in this case the Gupta Empire was a decentralized empire. So, according to the primary source that was listed, a Chinese Buddhist monk who went to India, he spoke very positively of life in Gupta India. He said, "The people are numerous and happy. Only those who cultivate the royal land have to pay a portion of the grain from it." In other words, there's very little in taxation. People aren't asked to give so much of what they grow to the government. And that's because a decentralized rule is cheaper, because you're not doing as much with your government, so you don't have to pay for as much in taxes with tax money. Throughout the whole country, the people do not kill any living creature, nor drink intoxicating liquor, so they don't drink alcohol, nor eat onions or garlic. So this has to do with some of the teachings within definitely Buddhism and Jainism, also some forms of Hinduism. Jains in particular are known for not eating onions and garlic, some Buddhists as well. And nonviolence, the idea of not killing any living creature. Even onions and garlic were considered violence to the earth in the way that they are dug up, and you're eating the root of the plant, so you're killing it. Of course, this Buddhist monk is only getting a glimpse at India. He's not visiting every single part of India, but this was his impression from what he saw. He says, in buying and selling commodities, they use cowrie shells, and all who are diseased go to houses of medicine. So medicine was very advanced in Gupta India. And I didn't go into that in detail in these slides, but Ayurvedic medicine, I can post some video clip for you about that, was really developing, and medical knowledge in India was very advanced, as well as in Greece. We'll see those blending together in the future. They're provided with every kind of help, and doctors examine their diseases. They get the food and medicines which their cases require, and are made to feel at ease. The emphasis here on not just medicines, but food and medicines, because a lot of Indian medicine was focused on nutrition and diet, that if somebody had a certain condition, they would say, "You're not eating well, and here's what you need to change about your diet." So that's pretty cool. They were focused on that. They weren't just prescribing drugs for everything. So now looking at the next couple of slides, one is about the religion in India, and one is about the Golden Age in India. And that's the two main things that we want to look at here. Make sure everything's still recording okay. All right. So in terms of religion, we saw in the Mauryan Empire that Buddhism had a big a surge in its popularity, and grew and spread as a result of the efforts of the Mauryan Empire, particularly Ashoka. In the Gupta Empire, it's Hinduism. Hinduism makes a big comeback, and also has a major development that leads to essentially the Hinduism that we see in the world today. Hinduism is a very diverse religion. There are many different ways of practicing Hinduism, but we've already learned about some of its history and some of the different layers in Hinduism. So we started out with the Vedic tradition that came from the Aryans, had a lot to do with sacrifices to the gods. They believed in the caste system. They believed in some of the very important gods within Hinduism, although the focus of those has changed. And that gave the one structure of the basis of Hinduism. Another element was the religion of the people that were in India before the Aryans, and their religion was called Shramana, and that brought in the ideas of reincarnation, of karma and dharma, and the idea of moksha, that we want to reach release or release from the cycle of rebirth, or escape from the cycle of rebirth by becoming one with everything, or becoming one with God or Brahman. And that became this early form of Hinduism that we call Brahmanism, where they believed that all the many different gods they believed in were ultimately manifestations of one God, Brahman, the universal creator. But that religion also was very similar to Buddhism and Jainism in that it emphasized giving up your desires and trying to live a simple life and becoming detached from the material world to focus on the spiritual. But just like Buddhism, it had a hard time getting people on board with that sort of religion. So where we saw Mahayana Buddhism try to become more popular by becoming more devotional and becoming more focused on things that people could understand more easily, Hinduism has a similar development in what we call classical Hinduism, where we had something called the Bhakti movement. The Bhakti movement, Bhakti means devotion, and it took Hinduism in a direction where it wasn't focused so much on trying to reach moksha, reach basically salvation by denial of the self and asceticism and being a monk and devoting yourself in a way that you're giving up your desires, but it's focusing more on your devotion to a particular god. So some people focused on one single god that was their main god. They believed in other gods, but they focused on one, or they believed in a small group of gods. And the idea was that by devoting yourselves to and worshiping that god, that was one of the paths to moksha, to salvation, to release from the cycle of rebirth. And so that's a lot easier. It's a lot less complicated than saying you have to give up all your desires, you have to give up all your belongings, you have to lead this spiritual, philosophical life. Just saying you can pray to your God and be devoted to your God, and that's all you need to do, and you'll be able to reach moksha. Many people focused on either Vishnu or Shiva as the main god. So there are certain forms of Hinduism that focus on one primarily, but there are others who are important as well. The Gupta Empire built many temples throughout India, and during this time there were many new holy texts that became important. So in the early days we learned about the Vedas, which was brought by the Aryans, as their teachings blended with those that were local to India, and we got some of those spiritual teachings. We saw the Upanishads as important texts, and now we have the Bhagavad Gita, which is actually part of a work of literature. It was part of an epic poem called the Mahabharata, which is similar to the Iliad and the Odyssey in Greece. But it was a short section of it where one of the main characters is in conversation with a god, in this case Krishna, and they're having a conversation back and forth, and they discuss all different things about life and about religion, and it kind of summarized the very diverse and complicated beliefs of Hinduism into a story that people could read and people could understand. And so Bhagavad Gita was very important in developing classical Hinduism, to make it approachable, to make it accessible to people. Read the story. I know there's a lot of different texts, a lot of different books of Hinduism. You have to read a lot, and some of them are in other languages. But look, if you just read this story, Bhagavad Gita, you'll get the gist. And that made it easier for people to embrace. And so during this period, while we saw Buddhism was on a growth path, suddenly Hinduism takes over and becomes the most dominant religion within India, thanks to these efforts to make it more appealing to people. You can see that in this quote from the Bhagavad Gita, in the story of Krishna and Arjuna having a conversation. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you can devote yourself by giving up your desires, right? Who is unbiased, who abandons all efforts to make gains from the world, he is dear to me. who abandons both what is liked and disliked, he is dear to me. Right? Who is homeless, of a steady mind. These are examples of asceticism, of giving up your desires, right? That we saw also in Jainism and Buddhism. But they know that's not appealing to everybody, so at the same time, he's also talking about devotion to God, saying, whose mind, understanding are devoted to me is dear to me. Who is full of devotion to me is dear to me. Again, who is full of devotion is dear to me. Many times throughout the text, he mentions that. And so you have two different paths. You can apply the path of being someone who gives up all their desires, who pushes away their wants, who detaches from the world, and be dear to the God. But you can also do that by devoting yourself. And finally, the Gupta Empire was a time period of a golden age, a time where art, medicine, science, and math, and literature were really thriving within India and growing. So there are a lot of different advances that took place at this time. There's a lot of advances in medicine, as I mentioned, and astronomy. The most important one to me personally, and I think I try to emphasize to you guys, is mathematics. Two big developments that have a huge influence on history here are Hindu numerals. The numbers that we use today were invented in India, and our place decimal system, the way that we do math, by having a ones column, a tens column, a hundreds column, a thousands column, are both things that came out of India. So why is that such a big deal? Try doing multiplication of numbers in the thousands or tens of thousands using Roman numerals, right? They did not have a system of decimal places. It was just a bunch of letters that represented the number. You could figure out what the number is, but you can't really do math with that. It's not a tool that's designed for math. So having this Hindu numeral system, there's only 10 symbols, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then they repeat, depending on what place you put them in the line of numbers. They could be tens, hundreds, thousands, right? We can have decimal place. And having it where the ones line up, the tens line up, the hundreds line up, you can add down the list, you can multiply, right? Doing math like that was a huge boost. That was a huge advantage, because suddenly you can multiply a number like 5,362 times 187 very quickly, where you don't have to try to imagine it or picture it or do some kind of thing with pebbles, or you can just write it on the paper, do the columns, and you're done. Super quick. Quick maths, right? And that makes so many things possible. That's going to make astronomy easier. So that's going to make architecture easier because you can do the calculations. So many things are going to be made easier by the fact that math has this new development, this new way of doing math that was developed. So it's the Hindu numerals, which are sometimes called Arabic numerals because they spread to the Arab world as well. So we can call them Hindu Arabic numerals. And the place decimal system, the idea that there is a ones column, a tens column, a hundreds column, that was invented by Gupta India. They also increased in trade within the Indian Ocean. So that is going to mean that these ideas are going to spread. So their advances, their religious developments, as well as their technological and scholarly and scientific advances are going to spread beyond India. And we will see in future units how other regions of the world who have their own golden ages, a lot of what they have that makes it a golden age, they are actually borrowing from India and developing it further. So everyone is benefiting from the other. And you can see in the pictures that I included where it shows the Indian decimal system, how it developed into what we have today. Unfortunately, sadly for the Gupta, they did eventually decline, and they were conquered by the White Huns, which were a subgroup of the Huns we mentioned in class today, but we'll learn more about later this week. They came in, they conquered, they weakened the state, and some of those local rulers that we mentioned, because they had a decentralized state, they were vulnerable to conquest, and they were also vulnerable to rebellion. And so some of the local rulers rebelled, and the Gupta Empire lost its control, and India was divided into smaller states for a long time. So that is the end. I would recommend you guys looking at the pictures at the end of the slides, and hopefully this helps you to add a little bit more than just reading the slides over yourselves. I know I went on a bit of a rant on some of these things, but you have the ability to pause, rewind, fast forward, or just X me out if you are not interested. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I'll post this up for you today and try to make it available so you can complete the chart for homework. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. All right? Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.